stay there. Give me just a second. Okay, Sky, I think we are ready.
All right. Dr. Conley walks down the hall of a hospital. In room 427, he sees a man suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. Room 429 is home to a woman dying of cancer. To Dr. Conley's left, he sees a nurse helping an elderly woman attempt to walk. Dr. Conley has been working with this woman for years, but he knows the next time he goes to speak with her, she won't remember him. Her battles with Alzheimer's and multiple sclerosis have left her mind and body deteriorated. All of these patients have clearly expressed to Dr. Conley that they prefer death over suffering with their debilitating conditions. Because they are unable to end their lives themselves, they've requested Dr. Conley's assistance. Having watched the quality of these patients' lives diminish over time, Dr. Conley would consider the proposition, but he knows that if he were to grant their wishes, he could be accused of homicide. Currently, millions of people are suffering with excruciatingly painful or terminal illnesses. Many of these people are being denied the choice to receive assistance in humanely ending their own lives by way of euthanasia. Having done initially unbiased research on the topic of euthanasia in high school, I was able to develop a justified opinion about the legality of the matter. Through my thorough research, I can say without a doubt that euthanasia must be legal. From my survey, I know that the majority of you in this room agree that euthanasia should be legal. However, some of you disagree or say you aren't educated enough in the matter to have an opinion. That is why today, I would like to discuss current euthanasia laws and inform you about both sides of the debate so that you can see for yourselves that the United States must legalize euthanasia to end the suffering of terminally ill patients. First, I'd like to explain exactly what euthanasia is. Euthanasia is the practice of ending another's life with the aim of enabling the person to avoid severe suffering from terminal illness. Euthanasia has already been legalized in several locations. The first legalization of euthanasia was in Australia's Northern Territory in 1965. In Europe, Belgium, Switzerland, and the Netherlands have also decided to allow it, as well as Oregon and Washington in the U.S. Oregon passed the Death with Dignity Act in 1977, which states that a mentally competent person suffering from a terminal illness would be allowed to receive a lethal injection from a doctor. When a vote was taken within the state, 91% agreed that it should be legal. Washington followed the movement by passing a similar law. Some people say euthanasia should not be legal because they believe it is the same as murder. If this were the case, physicians who assist suicide would be convicted of the same charges that serial killers are prosecuted with. Dr. Jack Kevorkian found himself in this predicament. Dr. Kevorkian was a Michigan doctor who performed over 100 physician-assisted suicides. He built a humane and pain-free suicide machine that allowed the user to administer toxic gases or injections to themselves. Over the years, Dr. Kevorkian faced many charges, but eventually all were dismissed. However, in 1999, he was charged and sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. This may sound like a somewhat harsh sentence, but it's nothing when compared to what he would have been facing as a mass murderer. A mass murderer would have been charged with a life sentence or the death penalty. Also, throughout all the trials, Dr. Kevorkian had many followers and supporters. This clearly shows that many agree with the practice of euthanasia. Now, some critics believe that if euthanasia were legal, some of the physician-assisted suicides would be involuntary or against the patient's will. However, the truth is that when euthanasia is legal, special guidelines are put in place to make sure this does not happen. Policies such as mandatory written consent of a conscious patient or of the family would eliminate any discrepancies when it comes to involuntary situations. Another concern of the critics is that persons who are terminally ill or depressed would be wishing to die. However, this would not be the case. As explained by the definition of euthanasia in law books and other official documents, euthanasia is specifically directed towards terminally ill persons. If the U.S. legalized euthanasia, it would be policy that under no circumstances would a physician be allowed to assist in the suicide of any patient who is not terminal. Sometimes it is argued that after a lethal dose is prescribed to the patient, but not yet administered, the quality of care for the patient declines. According to the American Medical Association, patients near the end of life must continue to receive emotional support, comfort care, adequate pain control, respect for patient autonomy, and good communication. Within this quote, the American Medical Association addressed the risk that nurses and doctors would not be accommodating or conscious of the pain of the patients as they reach the end of life, because they've already been given a lethal prescription. To contradict this idea, there has been statistical evidence to prove that after the Oregon Death with Dignity Act was passed, Oregon rose to be the leading prescriber of morphine in the U.S. The amount of prescribed morphine increased dramatically in order to decrease any physical or emotional suffering of the patient. This leads us to the final point critics make to oppose euthanasia. They say that end-of-life hospice care would be a better alternative. These residential services are very beneficial for terminally ill patients, but they also have their negatives. A nurse named Mary Beth Berry, who specializes in caring for terminally ill patients, disagrees with assisted suicide and believes that hospice care is the superior option. She promotes hospice programs because she says they minimize pain and spiritually prepare the person for death. However, she does admit that they don't always work well because some patients are admitted too late, within 72 hours of their death. When this occurs, it is difficult for the patients as well as the nurses because they must act quickly to handle the crisis. While hospice care is generally a good option when it comes to end-of-life care, it can still be used alongside euthanasia. Since euthanasia has been legalized in Oregon, hospice referrals have actually increased by 20% because the hospitals are still wanting to keep some funds cycling through these programs. Now that we've been able to counter all arguments presented by critics opposed to euthanasia, we can discuss why it is so beneficial. For starters, even most doctors are supportive of the Right to Die movement. According to a New England Journal of Medicine, studies have shown that 60% of doctors say they should be able to help terminally ill patients die, and 7% say they already have. Dr. Stephen Follansbee says, "If I can at least discuss this with patients, it becomes an issue of abandonment." Anna Sinclair, a doctor of 26 years who works at an ER at Quincy Medical Center, says she supports the Right to Die movement. Sinclair acknowledges that more can be done to save the patients' lives and make them more comfortable, but she believes that euthanasia is generally for the best. Also, euthanasia must be legalized so that regulation may be implemented. Physician-assisted suicides are happening whether or not it is legal. According to a San Francisco survey of doctors who treat AIDS, 53% say they've already assisted in the death of at least one patient. Regulation must be implemented to prevent the abuse of euthanasia and protect doctors from liability suits. If regulations were enforced, there would be little to no abuse of euthanasia. Physician-assisted suicides would be documented, and it would be much easier to prosecute those who are doing it illegally. A third benefit of euthanasia is in terms of healthcare expenses. Costs would be greatly reduced by allowing euthanasia, and by therefore limiting the amount of money spent on hospice and general end-of-life care. Not as many people would be living in hospice facilities and draining valuable resources that could be used on individuals who have the potential to recover from their illnesses. Now that we've seen the benefits of euthanasia being legal, we can discuss exactly what the policy would entail. Essentially, the U.S. must legalize euthanasia, but because this law is on a state-by-state basis, it can be accomplished by concerned physicians lobbying to their individual state governments. If the physicians are aware of the general public approval for the legalization of euthanasia, they are more likely to take action. If euthanasia was legal, the law would mandate guidelines that the patient must be terminally ill, be declared as mentally competent by the psychiatrist, and provide written consent if possible. If this is not possible, the family must provide written consent. Physician-assisted suicides would be strictly documented, and non-authorized incidences would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. This would ensure that no legal or ethical issues would arise. Although euthanasia is a controversial topic, much opposition to the notion of it can be refuted through simple logic, statistics, and examples from places where it's already been legalized. When it comes down to it, shouldn't Dr. Conley be allowed to grant the wishes of his dying patients? Shouldn't the opinions of the terminally ill who want to die be taken into consideration? Even more consideration than the healthy people against euthanasia? In essence, shouldn't terminally ill patients be allowed to make the decision to alleviate their pain and suffering by voluntarily ending their own existence? Yes. The answer is yes. Thank you.